woman tried to get off the 100-meter platform. First, she took off one of her high heels and threw it down. The shoe took a while to hit the ground. She gritted her teeth and kicked off the other shoe. Then, with great difficulty, she turned around on the narrow shelf and slowly pushed her lower body down. Finally, she let go and fell to the ground with a scream. But strangely enough, she was unharmed. It turned out that the actual height of the shelf was only 2 meters, but she had stayed on it for 3 years and her extreme fear of the ground had given her an illusion of height. Alice hadn't been on her feet for 3 years. She was hobbling like a baby and had almost forgotten how to use her legs. Who would have guessed that she was once a glamorous supermodel whose job was to strut her stuff? Her job was to strut her stuff on the runway. From a young age, Alice's mother had instilled in her the idea that it wasn't important for a woman to have a good brain, but to be beautiful so that she could marry a rich man and effortlessly rise to the top of the ladder. So Alice began to take part in beauty contests at a young age when she couldn't even read and write. And after she grew up, she became a supermodel as a matter of course. Although Alice found the job boring, she always saw it as a springboard to achieve her goals in life. Then Alice became a success at a show. She met a billionaire. They fell in love at first sight that night. They stayed in a hotel. The next morning, they went back to the rich man's house. Alice immersed in the luxury of the mansion and the sweetness of love. But one morning, Alice woke up to find that her boyfriend was not with her. She looked around the house and finally in the living room to see her boyfriend to build a shelf on the wall. He told her that this is specially prepared for her. Alice at first thought that the shelf was for trophies or collectibles, but her boyfriend laughed and said that the shelf was for Alice and that she would be living on it from now on. This is ridiculous. Alice, of course, did not want to say that she still has a job. Boyfriend immediately let her quit and said not to work as a lot of people dream of life. By then the food will be rich and fancy clothes and jewelry will be sent to her, followed by her boyfriend a lot of praise. Baby, you are so different. Why do you want to live like other people's ordinary life? In order to make her boyfriend happy, Alice agreed to try. She stepped on the ladder and sat on the shelf. Every cell of her body was protesting, but she still managed to endure the discomfort and made a smile. Her boyfriend pretended not to notice her reluctance and quickly moved the ladder away from her and then tilted his head back to admire his work of art, and so Alice became one of his exhibits like a real-life Barbie doll. Soon after the two were married, the wedding took place in this room. Alice sat on a shelf in her gorgeous wedding dress, and her husband proudly showed her off to all the guests who looked up to Alice as if she were a precious collector's item, even on her wedding night. Alice didn't come down from the shelf and her husband climbed up the ladder to spend the night with her on the shelf. At first, Alice's resistance faded because her husband was really there for her every day as she promised. He couldn't take his eyes off her when he was on the phone to take care of business and complained that his work made it impossible for her to concentrate on admiring her little baby. Moreover, her husband sent her gifts every now and then, fresh bouquets of flowers, diamonds, and jewelry, and he even hired a maid to take care of Alice, who only had to lie on a shelf and dress herself up to make her husband feel comfortable. At that time, both husband and wife seemed to be satisfied with this kind of life. However, as time goes by, both of them gradually changed their ideas, translated with deep calm, free version. But it didn't last long, and soon her husband stopped giving her gifts as often as he used to, and only gave her a kiss before he left the house. The maid teased her and said, "No present today?" Alice put on a brave face and said, "A kiss is also a very sweet gift. It's better than a treasure for me." But the truth is in front of her eyes. She can't fool herself. Soon, her husband no longer gazed at her lovingly. Even though Alice was well-dressed, she was still not as attractive as a computer screen to her husband. When Alice made contact with her husband, he either responded perfunctorily or simply pretended not to hear her. Alice thought maybe she wasn't beautiful enough, so she tried to dress up every day to try to attract her husband's attention again. But it didn't work out that way. Not only did it fail to make her husband look at her more, but it caused him to hate her. Her husband even moved his desk so that he could work with his back to Alice and claimed that the light was better from that position. Alice said on the surface that you are happy, but in her heart, she had already been angry and gnashed her teeth the more she thought. The more aggrieved, she could not help but cry. So Alice lived on the shelf for 3 whole years. Now her husband has become not at all home. Servants also removed most of them. Alice was so thirsty that she screamed at the top of her lungs, but no one paid any attention to her in this empty mansion. Finally, Alice made a bold decision to leave the shelf, but the long time living on the shelf made her fearful of coming back to the ground and even felt that the less than 2 meters high shelf was as scary as a tall building, but she still had the courage to jump down. Luckily, she didn't fall and Alice was like a child learning to walk again, trying to get used to her legs as she walked with somewhat rusty steps outside again after 3 years. At this moment, she was giving vent to her deep-seated desire to trample through puddles of water like a child and pour baskets of tennis balls down the stairs so exhilaratingly free that she forgot all about her husband and couldn't even bring herself to drink. After sneaking out of the mansion and hitching a ride with the post office, Alice mischievously scattered other people's mail on the road as if she wanted them to be free. Just like her, the postal car stopped in the town. Alice also followed out of the car. At this time, she has basically regained the ability to move in the street and kept dancing as if she had her own stereo. In the eyes of this ordinary streetscape has become invaluable. Alice enthusiastically greeted every passerby, and the passersby also responded kindly to her. She even rubbed up against a man's motorcycle and enjoyed the feeling of richness across her face. She was like a wild horse out of control, as if she had just been released from a mental hospital. She grabbed a traffic ticket and tore it up, and when she saw someone doing yoga, she mimicked it upside down. Alice ran all the way to the beach and danced as she pleased. And amazingly, the crowd seemed to be infected by her joy and danced with her as if she were a source of joy. Finally, Alice plunged plunged into the sea and the cold water sobered her up from her revelry, soaked to the skin. Alice stepped ashore only to realize that the people she had just danced with were just an illusion and that the beachgoers were looking at her as if she were a fool. Alice walks down the street shivering in the cold. Her happiness fades and she is overwhelmed, suddenly realizing that she has no idea where to go from here. Just then she passed by a beauty store and watched the makeup artist applying makeup to the customers and then looked at her own messy appearance reflected on the glass. Alice stroked her face and made a new decision in her mind that she wanted to take care of herself properly. Translated with D. Bell. Calm, free version.